Okay, so we're... Oh, sorry, we have to start the meeting. Good evening, staff, council, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this evening for our Committee of the Whole and public meeting under the Planning Act. I see that we have quorum, and I call this meeting to order. It has been moved by Councillor King that the agenda for the January 26, 2015 special meeting of the Committee of the Whole be adopted as circulated. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. That is any conflicts of interest. Do any members have any conflicts they need to declare?
No, Mr. Mayor.
There are no conflicts. Can you note that in the minutes, please, Madam Deputy Clerk? Now we'll move to a public meeting under the Planning Act. And I see that there are some members of the public here, so thank you for joining us. The Planning Act requires under Section 3412 that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public of a proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw. This public meeting has been called to satisfy these requirements. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on December 2nd, 2014. Notice was provided information on the property and the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw. In addition, planning staff were provided information on the application. We'll also receive any comments from which any member of the public may wish to offer. There is an attendance list on the table here, and I noticed that some of you signed that, so we appreciate that, and we'd ask all present to sign and print their name and complete mailing address if they wish to be notified of the passage of an amendment by council, should that occur. If a person or body decides to file an appeal of a decision made by council in respect to a proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw and does not make oral submission at a public meeting or make written submissions to the town of Pelham before the proposed amendment is adopted or refused, the Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss all or part of the appeal. In closing, we stress that at this point no decision has been made on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and therefore any comments received will be taken into account by council and staff in their consideration. Ms. Hannah, you were so anxious to get started, so please lead us through.
Good evening, Chair, member of council, and members of the public. I'm here to present the information for the public meeting regarding 21 Port Robinson Road, zoning amendment application AM 1414.
Go closer to the podium just so that it's picked up by the video. Thank you.
Okay. The purpose of the application is to allow for a single detached dwelling unit. Previously, a church occupied the site. The location, as you can see on the map, is on the north side of Port Robinson Road, east of Pelham Street. The municipal address is 21 Port Robinson Road, and the legal description is Plan 24, Lot 12, New Plan 658. The subject parcel is surrounded by existing single detached dwellings that are zoned residential 2, R2, and directly across from the parcel is an open play field associated with the public Glen A. Green Elementary School. Briefly, the subject parcel history. The lot is part of the Emmett Plan of Subdivision, which was registered in 1915. It was identified for residential use at that time. The 1959 zoning bylaw zoned the property residential 2, R2, and it was noted that the property was used for institutional use. In 1974, the zoning bylaw zoned the property institutional I. In 2014, the property was sold, a demolition permit was issued, and the building that occupied the site was demolished. On November 20th, 2014, a pre-consultation meeting was held. And on December 1st, 2014, a rezoning application was made to change the zoning from institutional I zone to residential 2 R2 zone. For committee's information, under the Environmental Protection Act, a record of site condition for a change to a more sensitive use is required for the subject parcel. A record of site condition is required to be submitted to the Environmental Site Registry prior to the issuance of a building permit and any act done in the execution or intended execution of any power or duty under the Planning Act. For committee's information, this evening I received the paper copy of the record of site condition that has been submitted to the environmental site registry. In terms of provincial policies, in regards to the provincial policy statement, the subject parcel is within a settlement area. In regards to the Greenbelt plan, the subject parcel is within a settlement area, therefore the Greenbelt plan policies do not apply. Similarly, the subject parcel is outside of the Niagara Escarpment plan area, therefore the Niagara Escarpment plan policies do not apply. And it is within a built-up area within the growth plan for the Greater Golder Horseshoe. The provincial policies direct development to settlement areas to utilize existing municipal sewage and water services, facilitate compact form, and encourage an appropriate range and mix of housing types and densities. The regional official plan designates the property as within the urban area. Regional policies state that urban areas will be the focus for long-term growth and development and encourages the provision of a variety of housing types.
I believe so.
In the town official plan, the subject property is designated as urban living area, urban boundary. The permitted uses include single detached residential dwellings, accessory apartments, and single detached townhouse multiple and apartment dwellings. And the town zoning bylaw identifies the property as currently being zoned institutional I zone. The permitted uses in the institutional zone include churches, cemeteries, schools, and nursing homes. The property is proposed to be rezoned to residential R2 zone, and the permitted uses include one single detached dwelling and home occupation. On December 2nd, 2014, notice was circulated to external and internal departments directly affected by the proposed application, and notice was circulated to all assessed property owners within 120 meters of the subject parcel's boundaries. In addition, a public notice sign was posted on the property facing Port Robinson Road. In regards to the comments received, the Niagara region has no objection to the application, subject to the required record of site condition prior to the issuance of the residential building permit by the town, and again, that was provided this evening. The town's Department of Public Works and Utilities, Fire and Bylaw Services, and the Building Division have stated they have no issues or objections to this application. And in regards with the public, to date, no comments have been received. In conclusion, this presentation has provided information on zoning bylaw application AM 1414 to allow for a single detached dwelling unit. No recommendations or decisions have been made at this meeting. I'd like to thank the members of the public and council for attending this evening's meeting. Following tonight's meeting, questions and comments on this file may be directed to me. My email and extension are provided, and I now open it to any questions or comments from the floor and members of the public.
Thank you, Ms. Hannah. I think what we're going to do is see if council has any questions, and then we'll invite the applicant to make a presentation, and then others. So questions for Ms. Hannah? Councillor?
I can phrase this as a question, I suppose. But really, I want to make a comment. I want to just comment on the presentation that you made. It's a departure from the usual sort of presentation that we've received, and it is really clean and clear, and it makes it really easy for us to follow along. Love this this approach to not same old, but do something different, and I think it's great. So congratulations to you and probably the Director of Planning and the CAO. I think it's great. And I wish I could remember what comment I was going to make or question I was going to ask regarding that, but I can't. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I had said the same thing, and I think others are agreeing as well. So thank you very much for the presentation. Questions to the matter? Or Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I have a question regarding the institutional zoning. Is it a quirk that our institutional zone allows nursing homes, senior citizen homes, schools, and yet having a single-family dwelling is regarded as a more sensitive use than a senior citizen's home? And I find that kind of almost unbelievable.
It would have to, there would have to be a full comprehensive review of other communities to see if they also have their nursing homes within institutional use. In terms of being considered a more sensitive use, it's the Environmental Act that identifies when you go from an institutional use to a residential, that's what triggers the record of site condition. So it's the classification. They don't specify necessarily down to every type of institutional use that can be considered. They do provide some examples within the Environmental Act.
Thank you. Mr. Glover, is there anything to add to that from other communities' perspective?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, the difference is that there's a number of things that are included in institutional zone, and typically it's because of the type of use and the intensity of that use. So nursing home, hospital, school, they would have parking restrictions, they would have professionals associated with that, and it's grouped together that way. A residential use could be apartment, could be single detached, could be duplex, et cetera, has a different connotation to it, and that's why they're separate from each other, and residential is typically not included in institutional. But if it's council's desire, we can look at the institutional designation, see what's included in it, and maybe update that. We will be going through a comprehensive zoning assessment in the near future, and again, if council wants that, we can look at that issue.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think it'd be worth looking at. I mean, if institutional precipitates, an environmental study that when you go to a residential use, then why are we allowing a senior citizen home or a school or a nursing home in that institutional zoning? Maybe there's a subclassification or something that will accommodate that when we do the comprehensive zoning bylaw review.
Okay. Quickly, Mr. Glover?
Sorry, through you again, Mr. Chair. That record of site condition is, you can't get around that in terms of the type of use. If it's more sensitive, say it was zoned residential and a hospital was permitted in the residential for some reason, to go to a single detached, that's a more sensitive use, you still need a record of site
Really?
condition.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Derlin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is certainly a valuable conversation. However, it really doesn't deal with the issue. So, perhaps we can deal with the application as it's here now, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Others to the application? Thank you, Ms. Hannah, for your presentation. It was very clear as stated. Mr. Albano, I believe you're here. Would you like to add anything as applicant?
I don't have too much to say. Julie covered most of it very well, I think. I just went and got the environmental assessment, and if you look on page 3 on that book and page 20 in that assessment, it says that there's absolutely no reason why it can't proceed to a residential designation, because they find no problems with the property. So that's all I've got to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Albano from council? None, so thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment? Any members of the public that would like to comment on the application? Doesn't look like it. Thank you. And now, any other committee input? Any other input from members of committee on the application or questions? Councillor Powell.
Very quickly, through you, Mr. Mayor, to either Mr. Glover or Ms. Hannah, you're building a single-family home, is that what I understand? So lot coverage would comply to what our requirements are, right?
Currently, the application is for a standard R2 zone.
R2.
It's not for site-specific, so the building permit, when it
Right.
is brought forward, it's the expectation of planning staff that it would meet the existing regulations within the R2 zone,
Under R2? Okay, that's fine.
which is what the surrounding community
Yeah, they are.
is in that area.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Okay,
Thank you, Councillor. Other councillors? Thank you, Ms. Hannah. Mr. Albano, We do now have resolutions. It's been moved by Councillor King that Committee of the Whole receive the issue summary report for information as it pertains to application file number AM 1414 regarding 21 Port Robinson Road, and further that committee direct planning staff to prepare a recommendation report on this topic for council's consideration. Any further discussion? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried.
Next one's not the correspondence.
Thank you. And that means that our public meeting under the Planning Act is complete. Thank you very much for joining us. We have another part of our meeting, and that is the presentation of the 2015 capital budget. Thank you again, sir. Before we begin, I do want to officially welcome Ms. Gilbert to our meeting this evening. This is her, as I think the CEO indicated, is her first day, and here she is at a meeting. So thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the town of Pelham. And I found out that her favorite colors are green and yellow, so you'll find that the arches are green and yellow this evening as a welcome to her. So there you go. Thank you.
I'll light them up when Montreal wins the cup.
That's right. And if the Leafs ever win it, they'll be
And we'll
white
have
and
a
blue.
parade.
I'm afraid we won't be up that long.
I'm not worried about that.
So, speaking of the Leafs, I know Ms. Pupo is a Leafs fan, but we do appreciate her her recommendations when it comes to capital budget and not when it comes to sports. So, Ms. Pupo, if you wouldn't mind taking it away.
Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to bring forward the 2015 capital budget. As council is aware, council and senior staff have received a copy of the capital budget. Some at a retirement party on last week, but others today. The discussions for this capital budget, as council is aware, have gone on for some time now, and there's been lots of discussion about staying in line with our strategic plan and critical infrastructure needs mostly. On December 8, 2014, there was a budget open house, and it has driven some of the requests in the capital budget that's presented tonight. I'll highlight those as we get to them. Again, the pending development of these Fonthill lands is also dictated specific projects that need to be completed in order for the development to begin. And again, we are making sure that we're in line with our strategic plan. Some other highlights is the 5-year forecast that we have included in this budget. It focuses on the longer-term development and sustainability. It ensures that we are staying focused on our strategic plan and its vision, and it allows us to provide adequate planning for financial needs in the future, as we've discussed in length. It ensures transparency with council and the community on what we're anticipating for infrastructure needs, and it allows us to adjust annually as required. And you will note at tab 12, I believe it is, the major capital infrastructure investments are also included in this 5-year plan, and that includes the Maple Acre Library relocation or renovation and the new community and recreation facility. If you look at your 5-year spending chart at the beginning in the summary pages of section 1, you will see that the total spending in 2015 represents about 22% of the overall spending after 5 years. The funding for the 2015 capital budget is done largely through existing reserves, some grant funding, development charges, debentures, and other contributions. And the major funding of capital projects from reserves, it receives an annual contribution from operating that is transferred into the reserve fund. And also that increase for 2015, which you will see in the operating budget presentation, is $175,979. This is a summary of the capital budget requests to 2019. You'll note that the major capital infrastructure investments have just been put out to 2016 just for the sake of placeholding them onto this chart. It will be obviously council's decision to either move those forward or push them back out further. The 2015 total request is just over $5.6 million, and the total request at 2019, including 2019, would be about $25 million without the major infrastructure and $53 million including it. I'm now going to go through each department area. I will stop after I've read the section of the increases, and I'll allow council to ask any questions. So in information technology, council has already seen this. There's been a request for an online email backup, remote backup for main servers, annual equipment, that's the replacement of equipment such as computers and printers and so forth in the building, and the implementation of 2 smart boards in meeting use rooms. The funding for these projects will be taken from the IT reserve of $58,300, and the reserve remains very healthy to 2019 with a balance of $177,481. And I will take any questions from council.
Thank you, Ms. Pupo. Questions from council regarding the IT portion of the budget and the overall? Go ahead, Ms. Pupo, then. Oh, Councillor Ribyak, sorry.
Just a quick question. This is a smart board that we have here on the, where will the other one be located? Where would the others be located?
There's one in this meeting room, and I believe the other one was, maybe
room.
Darren can help me with this one.
Okay.
McLeod room.
And are they all the same size as this one?
No,
They're smaller units?
there'll be a more condensed unit to fit the wall and so forth.
Thank you.
Fire department section, there's 420,000 requested. Again, it was to replace a 2000, or to get a 2015 pumper that replaces pump 2 that is over its useful life by a couple of years now, and the replacement of bunker gear in the amount of $20,000. This will be funded from the reserve completely and not debentured, and it is, the fire reserve remains very healthy to 2019, a balance of $487,06. I'll pause for any questions.
Councillor Papp.
Yes, through Mr. Mayor, and that's probably to the chief. The pumper itself, you're hoping to acquire this by the end of the year?
Yes, here, Mr. Mayor, yes.
And then what will happen, the other pumper will be put into auction? Is that the idea?
Currently pump 2, right, and we have pump 2A. Right. So 2 will become 2A, and the new pump will, right? And
So you're going to keep it in service?
But 2A,
Right.
which is now almost 24 years old,
Right,
will be, it's virtually, it's not worth anything, so we'll probably,
all right.
somebody we'll have to decide what we're gonna do with it.
Okay, that's what I was getting at, so it's...
Thank you, Chief.
There's no appraised value of it, it's not...
At this point, it's worth it.
Yeah, that's fine, that's all I need though. I want it.
We tried, did we not try, Councillor Papp, I think that's the direction you're going. You tried in previous years to acquire fire equipment?
I do, I could be in a conflict, so, but the bottom
Okay.
line is that I would like to pursue that avenue again
Okay.
with the service club, and if the CAO and the treasurer and the fire chief all have the particular service club contact you, but yes, that's the route.
Okay.
There is a need.
Thank you, Councillor. Others for the fire? Councillor?
I thought Councillor Durley might have.
Oh,
My question has been answered, thank you.
okay, thank
Yep.
you. Others? I think in a previous iteration, there was discussion about the possibility of adding on to Fire Station number 1, that was sort of in the 5-year forecast. Has that now been sort of punched out to future years? Maybe
No, it
6
hasn't.
years
It's
out?
actually in the facilities budget under,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
All
under
right, I'll
Public
look for it
Works.
there.
Yep. It's, I believe in 2018, it's been put in as a placeholder right now.
Thank you.
Okay. This is the facilities budget request for 2015. There are many small little items that need to be taken care of, and they include everything from lighting controls that are for energy efficiencies to the architectural design at Maple Acres, and the total request is $123,500. Again, this is, part of it is being funded by the Town Facilities Reserve. The architecture funding will come along with the whole renovation funding, so it will be partially debentured, and development charges will pay for the balance. The Town Facilities Reserve is growing or building itself up annually to a point of $485,000 at 2019. I'll pause here for any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Papp?
Sure. I haven't had a chance, and I apologize, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO and the treasurer. When it comes to the architectural design for Maple Acres, I would like to suggest the following. that actual project of Maple Acres, which is a reconstruction of that existing site, be undertaken as a design-build project. So no need, I'm just suggesting that we have enough information, and particularly from a technical standpoint, that we could go out. I think you did a similar thing with Fire Station 3, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if you did do that. That I would like to recommend, and I'd like to hear from my colleagues, that we actually don't need that $75,000, that we set an amount of roughly around $1 million or so, and go out and do a design build for that reconstruction of Maple Acres. I'll throw it out there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Do
you.
Do you want feedback from the treasurer, CAO?
Yeah,
or-
I've been doing a lot of thinking about it, and I've been talking to Simon. I just thought there's a way I want to expedite this, and part of it is that we have so many major things going on, and this is one of them, that we need to resolve this and reconcile it one way or the other. And I'm just looking back at the studies and stuff that we've done. I think it's something that's worthwhile considering. If not, then I'll acquiesce to what the wishes are of my colleagues and staff.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Others? Or Mr. CAO, is that in the art of the possible?
Yes, it is, Mr. Mayor. The concept behind a design build makes a lot of sense for Maple Acre. We have a lot of the needs assessment work done through the Seligman report. So I think that's a great route to go, and I would recommend that council consider that. As far as the financial feasibility, I'll defer to the treasurer. I know she can make that happen.
Is that possible?
Thank you. Do we want to hear from Ms. Pupo before we turn to colleagues? Okay, Ms. Pupo?
Definitely bringing it forward will impact on the debt repayment schedule, on our debentures, on the cash flow issues that were brought up at the last meeting, because it's now going to force the debt to come on board a year earlier than we anticipated in that schedule. So I would have to go back to the table, sure, I can make it work, but I would have to go back to the table and see what that impact is, because we have estimated, based on it taking place in 2016, that the payment certificates would start coming probably about mid-year and following up late year. So cash flow, we've monitored on how that could be happening. So that whole process is going to come forward this year. And we have not received the funding from the debentures that we have to put in place for last year already. So it does have a trickle effect across, but, I can do some magic.
Okay, thank you. Mr. CAO wants to add a little bit to that. Mr. CAO, and then I'll turn to colleagues. Councilor
Just
Durham.
to build on that, something that council could consider is if you were to issue a tender for a design build, you could do a couple of things, or if you were to approve this in the budget, rather, we could do a couple of things. One, we could defer the actual tendering until midsummer. That way the design would happen into the fall, and that would then see construction in 16 rather. That would help spread the money out over 2 fiscal years. Or you could simply issue the tender with a design build for this year and the construction for next year as one package. That might help with the treasurer's concerns.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Durley.
That was my point exactly, Mr. Mayor, in the discussion that we had earlier, and the threats that may happen in 2018 have me concerned. So I'm looking at to build it this year would be hazardous, perhaps, or at least there may be some consequences to do that. So although I believe the idea is a good one, I think the timing isn't right at this particular point in time. Going along with what the CAO says, if in fact it could be delayed to 2016 or 2017, that would be perfect, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to support Councillor Papp's suggestion. It's a departure from what we've been talking about, but I would say 2 things. First of all, I don't believe that the construction of a fairly simple building takes its inspiration from the heritage building that's already there, which is a very simple design. I don't think that's a major architectural feat, and to be thinking in terms of the kind of money that we're talking there to spend on an architect, I think would not be necessary. And second, I think going forward, the cost of a 3,500 square foot structure to add to what's there, it just bothers me to think that we would think in terms of $1.4 million or $1.5 million as its ultimate construction cost. I think it would come in for considerably less than that. So I think that looking at this project in those terms makes a great deal of sense, and I would certainly support that.
Okay, thank you. Others? to this? And I asked the CAO, I said, what's a suggested way forward? And Mr. CAO?
We could do a couple of things. I know that the estimate has been put at 1.3 million, but that would be architectural design and then build separately. That's a really rough estimate based on the Selectmen Report square footage, and then taking what the current construction industry costs would be at today's market and applying that. I think that what we could do is we could test the market in this area. We know the design parameters, so we could go for a call for proposals on the design build and test the market to see what the approximate costing would be. I do favor the approach of, setting a benchmark limit, an upset limit.
Yeah.
And then if we require more resources, we would return to council and ask permission. Or request funding, and then our target, obviously, our goal would be to come in at the best price possible, which I know, working with the fire station, with the treasurer, she's very ambitious in low prices.
Thank you. Just to comment on it, the idea appeals to me for exactly what the CAO said, that we could, I'll say, be in the driver's seat as opposed to the other way around. I know, for instance, that the town of Lincoln was quite successful when it did its new community center arena. They put an upset limit on it, and they said, that's it, design to it. Looking at the amount that's earmarked for 2016 for this, it does seem a little high, 1.365 million. If we could, benchmark it and say, put it all in for, because really they're looking for about 3,500 square feet, as I understand, 4,000. The Selectmen Report calls for 4,500 square feet. There's already 500 there. We could put an upset limit, as Councillor Papp indicated, on it and say, what can you do with this envelope? And then if it's more than that envelope, come back to us and ask for it. And we can figure out the timing from a cash flow basis, which will help the treasurer out, and the debenture approval. The other thing I think that we also need to do is there's some grants that we need to look into in terms of grants from other levels of government or the community. So somehow we have to work that in too, and they can be worked into that cost. So, Mr. CAO, in terms of a way forward, I guess the question is, Councillor Papp suggested a number. You've suggested that, or somebody suggested that somehow we quote-unquote test the market. Is that the right number? So in terms of a way forward, we may want to say, direct staff to do a little bit more research on this to see what they suggest in terms of the timing, what it could look like, and bring that back. And we could do similar to what Councillor Kersey had suggested in previous years in terms of red circling a number. So we can approve the most of the budget, the facilities budget, et cetera, red circle that number and say, before we go and spend any money on doing the design, or the architectural design, let's test the market and test the waters on the potential for a design build. Those are my thoughts on it. And Councillor Papp, you want to add to that?
I concur, and I'm notwithstanding, and I also agree with Councillor Durley. I'm not trying to set anything, that motion, in any further. All I want to do is make sure that we, whether you build it in 2016 or whether, to make sure that this building comes in at an appropriate, costing and is functionally capable of performing what it needs to be done at that particular site. But quite frankly, I don't think you need the architectural design, but I'm only saying that only from the point of view that we have enough information, and I concur with the CEO, go and find out what's out there, what they would bid on it, and then that gives us a chance to, because it will ultimately, I'm almost willing to bet, can't bet my car because I don't own it. The bank does. That we would come under budget and that we don't need to spend that kind of money, but it would be it would be very well done and complacent with what we're trying to achieve. So I understand that.
Thank you. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure it will be included when somebody has a look at it, but we have to consider there is some cost in demolishing and disposing
Yes.
of what's there as well.
Yes.
So that's an added cost to the construction that we need to keep in mind as well. So, when we're looking at a number, we better make sure that we consider all avenues there.
Okay, so
Thank you. Did you wanted to add something?
I would recommend, Mr. Mayor, to council, that you would say in the order of $1 million to the budget, and Red Circle it has been past practice with certain projects, allow us to do our research and come back and report to council with our findings.
Okay, you would suggest that as opposed to red circling this number?
Well, I would think if you want to go down the design build road, you might as well put the money in the budget and red circle it, pending a report back from us, rather than having to amend the budget later on.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pat, perhaps you can work on a resolution to that effect as we work our way through the budget? Unless council wants, do you want to vote on that now, or do you want to?
I'll make it as simple as possible that the reconstruction of the Maple Acres be considered as a build design protocol. And that, I don't think you need staff, but staff's direction would be to go out and find out what that cost would be. I don't want to nail the $1 million right now, but if it comes back, then that's the case. Unless you want to set an upper set limit, that was just what was in my mind at the time.
Just for clarification too, on the 1.365, the 65,000 is for the soft costs. Those are for the equipment, the additions of equipment and stuff. So when we did the fire station, the whole budget was for all of it. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear with respect to what's included in that number.
You got it.
Okay, councillor?
I agree. It has to be all-inclusive. We don't want to go back where you're coming back to us asking for things that should have been included. So all soft costs, engineering costs, and that would be included in that build design consideration, along with what Councillor Durley was saying, any demolition costs as well.
Okay. What I'd recommend is, unless there's further discussion at the moment, and there can be.
I need
what
some
I'd-
clarity, Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor.
what I'd recommend is that Councillor Papp, you work on formulating the resolution so that
Okay.
later on, what we normally do is we receive the presentation, then we go and we talk about resolutions about that. You may recall some of the previous capital budget presentations, we run through the resolutions. So, give me that. Councillor Kersey,
I'll defer until I see the motion.
okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions on this? Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a thought that if in fact we want to approve this draft budget, there pretty well has to be a number in there that we're looking at for the red circle. So I think this resolution needs to give some kind of a number in there that we'd be at red circled or not, but certainly in order to make things go forward, that has to be there, right?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pupo.
Yeah, I was going to mention that an upset limit would be critical, especially if we're going to go out to tender to test the market, because otherwise you're going to have RFPs from, maybe $400,000 to $5 million. So it just kind of keeps everybody on the same level playing field.
Okay, thank you. How would that work with fundraising? So we go out and do the design build and then we seek to raise funds. So this would be it's similar to the skate park, is that correct? So it would be a saving piece? Or maybe not like the skate park?
Skate park was a little bit different because it was doing the donations based on matching principles. So we could do the same thing again, or we could do a capital campaign. I know that there is some money already out there that's been spoken of. So the capital campaign can be at council's approval, whether it's in addition to the amount that they've, the upset limit, or it is part of the funding of the operation.
Okay.
So that would be up to council.
But it would seem like it's part of that budget. If there was some fundraising, would it be part of that number, I think, wouldn't it?
There's two ways of doing it. One is you can include the fundraising on top of that. I mean, I've seen it done both ways where they included the deductive, but it's a little bit risky. You're better off to finance the whole project, and then anything you raise over and above that is, forgive me, but not bonus, but it helps enhance the overall building itself.
Right.
Typically, some projects, they include the fundraising, but if you don't meet the fundraising target, then, and that's happened,
We
people
can
will
bring
come
that back
back.
to council at a later date as well for council to make that decision.
All right, thank you. Anything else at this point? And Councillor Kersey, I note that you want to discuss the resolution on
Yeah, I just need some clarity around timing and that sort of thing. Of its impact on the budget, yes, on the funding and the debentures and all that stuff. I think that's critical to take into consideration.
Agreed. Okay. Anything else on this point? Anything else on any of the other facility components that are here? I thought there was something, but there isn't. Good to see that the bay doors are being used from the old fire station number 2, so thank you for doing that. And there being nothing else, can you proceed to the next budget, please?
The road section has $2.9 million worth of roads projects. They're all summarized in here. Some of the projects include the Highland Avenue reconstruction, Effingham Street reconstruction from Metler to 500 meters south. One of the major infrastructure projects is the bridge number 10 replacement at Sawmill Road. The total projects, again, just over $2.9 million. They are funded as follows: 1.8 coming from roads reserves, 62 from development charges, 500,000 is coming from the federal gas tax grant that we receive annually, and 525 will be debentured. And that debenture is specifically for the Pelham Street reconstruction close to Carriage Hill, I believe, home. And the balance of the reserves remains very healthy. This is one of the things we wanted to see, is the reserves starting to build up over 5 years, and it's 1.3 million. So I will take any questions.
Thank you.
It is in tab 5 of your budget binder in case you want to see the details of each project.
Questions for Ms. Pupo or the recently retired Mr. Mantle? Or at least feted Mr. Mantle? Councilor Ribia.
Thank you. Just, I wonder if we could hear some comment with regard to streetlights and whether there's contemplation of moving toward LEDs and any of that, or is just maybe we can hear where we're going with this thing, or is it simply a repetition of what we're doing in the past, or what we have done in the past?
Mr. Mantle, can you assist us, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The first of the LED lights have been installed this week or last week on Effingham Street. 5 that were provided by a supplier just to see how they look. So they'll be energized possibly later this week. So they'll be in operation. But what our plan is to prepare a business case with respect to the LED, converting the system to an LED streetlight conversion. Currently, the town op has approximately 1,500 streetlights. High pressure sodium is what they're known as. The energy savings will be approximately 1/3 of what of the total value right now. So there's a savings there, but really the biggest saving is in the maintenance costs, which it'll be a brand new system, and obviously the repairs won't be there as they are right now. There's numerous repairs each week with respect to outages here and there, so it'll be a brand new system that we'll have. There are various scenarios to examine out there also, which relate to almost like a turnkey operation where a supplier will come in and they hire the contractor to install the lights, and then they'll also provide a maintenance contract for a number of years. So we're working on that business case right now to demonstrate that to council, or provide it to council so that an informed decision can be made.
Okay, so to the councilor's question, though, that's the LED program. How does it?
Is it reflected in the budget
Is it
number?
reflected here in the budget?
Not in the budget.
So when it mentions streetlights, can you remind us what is in the budget? There's $66,000.
$66,000.
Those refer to replacement of the lights on Pickwick Place. The poles are worn out. The lights themselves are worn out, so they'll be replaced with new poles and LED lights. Also, we've identified lights for the parking lot at the skate park. The skate park itself will be lighted. Currently it is, they just use the baseball diamond lights, which it's a lot of energy, a lot of light for what we're trying to do out there.
So there is an LED component to the price as it comes forward?
Yes.
And one related question. We've received some correspondence from people who indicated some concern with LED lighting, all that sort of thing. I take it that the lighting that we're going to get has taken all those sorts of things into consideration, and we're not going to have to.
From the Astrological Association.
Yeah, we got some from the Astrological Association, but also someone indicating that if we underlight, it could be a problem, or the fixture itself could allow spillage of light into areas where you don't want it. So, and I think those were good comments. I just wanted to be sure that you were aware of them, and that in fact is in all likelihood they've been taken into consideration, and the lights we're getting are going to meet all the requirements.
Mr. Mann.
I don't know if we'll be able to comply with a lot of some of the comments about the illumination levels, simply because the lights in certain areas are installed on every other utility pole, and to install them on every utility pole to provide the appropriate illumination would, it would almost double the street lights. So again, there's an additional cost. We'll be examining the whole process. It'll be a sort of a design build type of a process that we work through anyways.
And learning as we go, I'm sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. On lights, others on lights? Councillor, go ahead,
To
John.
you, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Duncan.
Alan, the whereabouts on Effingham Street, all those LEDs, just so we can see for ourselves where they are? The ones that are gonna come online?
That's, they're on Effingham between Canberra and Highway 20.
Okay.
There's
okay.
5 of them there.
Yep, thank you. And by the end of the week, or with whatever,
The lights are up right now. I contacted Hydro One this morning to power them up.
and they just went on the same poles that the HP lights were on?
There were no lights in that area before.
Oh, okay.
This is
Oh.
expansion to the system.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others to lights? Appreciate that, and we look forward to that report when it comes forward. Others to other items in the budget that the treasurer has gone through.
This one's on vehicles.
The Carriage Hill, if I might. What's being proposed there? Is it only on Pelham Street, or does it also include Hurricane? Mr. Mel?
That work will take us up to the intersection of Hurricane and Pelham Street, is what the intent is, to capture that water that currently comes down Pelham and washes around the corner and onto the condominium property. I don't believe we identified any work up Hurricane Road at this time. I'd have to look at the detail sheet to see if that is there, but I don't recall that being in there.
Okay. There is that drainage ditch, or whatever that is, that crosses between Chestnut and Pelham, running in between there on Hurricane, and that was of concern for the residents. What's the proposed solution for that? Or do you anticipate that this correction on Pelham will solve that as well? I don't understand how it can solve that as well.
It'll deal with a fair amount of it. We can identify as part of the process, because this will be a request for proposal for consultants to design it, and then we'll tender it. We can identify that as part of the project, simply to run the catch basins or the storm sewer up that far. Again, it's not a great distance to go onto Hurricane a bit and capture that water.
Okay. They were quite concerned about that, I know, because that's the inlet for their pipe into their property, so.
Yeah, I think we can deal with that.
Okay, good. Councillor Ribbiak, on that point? Or-
Not on that point, a different point.
Okay, any others on that point? So we look forward to hearing more about that and that progressing. Now to a different point, Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regard to the watershed master study, I see that phase 2 is included in this. We talked a little bit over the last few weeks about possibly moving that whole study up and having it completed more quickly, so that we would have a full plan, a full idea of where we're going to go. That didn't make it into this, I take it.
Madam Treasurer?
The study has been in discussions with Mr. The Director of Public Works. It takes time to do each phase of the study regardless, so the studies can't, maybe you want to speak to it better, but with respect to, our funding and our cash flows and, certain things had to come off the table. So that was one of the things where he was saying the timing of it you know, to pull it up, it's still gonna take time to do those sections, and to do them properly. So, throwing it all in here, it wouldn't possibly get done all in 1 year, is my understanding, but maybe you want to speak to that more?
Mr. Mallon, there is something in the budget, I guess I'm confused, Counselor, so there is phase 2?
Phase 2 of 5.
Okay.
And we were talking about perhaps expediting that so that we would have a single plan that covered the entire town, upon which we could build a direction with regard to the control of flooding and water going forward. Now, if there are practical reasons not to do it, or if there are indeed fiscal reasons not to do it, then that's fine. But at least let's have the discussion a little bit, and if we don't want to proceed and we have good reasons not to proceed, then that's good. But I'd like to hear something about it.
Mr. Mallon, regarding the control of potential flooding.
Well, the practical reasons are that it's fairly time-consuming. It's not something that you just jump in and do studies. It's the surveyors are out on working on the first component of it right now, on the Ridgeville drain component of it. It takes time, and what'll happen out of that, and the drainage superintendent could probably speak better to it than I could. However, we discussed it last week and a little bit this morning also, and it's not simply doing the work. It's also the various hearings that you have to go through and advising the public. So, you know, having a number of these studies going on at the same time would probably be fairly complicated to do. Again, the drainage superintendent could probably speak much more clearly to it than I could, but that's my understanding of it. It's a lot of work, and trying to do a number of them all at once, I don't, it might be a little bit more than what council would want to be involved in at one time.
Counselor?
Thank you. So what you're saying is that this $75,000 would have to be replicated 4 times in order to get it done in 1 year? And it would probably involve more than 1 crew, but 4 crews to do it all?
Well,
I think that's kind of the gist of what you're saying, more people and much more money.
Well, that's the gist of it, but the real problem is or part of it, work is the dealing with the public as part of it, because you need to have hearings if the conclusions out of the study is that there's a need to expand a municipal drain or to create a new municipal drain, extensions to municipal drains, that requires public notifications and that sort of thing. So it's a lot of legwork to do as part of those projects.
Okay, thank you. Counselor, I think, I know this is something that residents are concerned with, and we all want to prepare for the potential for storms and flooding. But we haven't really seen, I don't think we have an overview document of what that plan looks like. So I'm going to turn to the CAO. Is it possible to get sort of an overview document that might answer the councilor's questions and address staff's concerns with putting it all together at once, as opposed to a measured year-by-year process, Mr. CAO?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Counselor, would that help you?
I think we're all used to the succinct answers from our CEO. We all appreciate them.
In terms of
one
in
final
terms of timing,
comment.
in the next couple of cycles?
Yeah, we can have something to council very quickly, Mr. Mayor, just that would come from the drainage superintendent and provide some of the answers to the technical questions that perhaps Mr. Mallon isn't prepared to answer tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Counselor?
you. Just a quick comment. It does rather sound like every one of these studies is the full meal deal, and that if any changes to drains are being suggested by the investigation, the public meetings and all the rest of it are being contemplated as part of this. I guess my vision of it, and I was wrong, and therefore I'm willing to stand down on this thing, but my vision of this would have been that as a result of a good look at what we've got, maybe council would have received a report saying here are the areas that will require change, and the public consultations and all of that would be part of the follow-up. But if the process is that it's required to do all of that at the same time, then obviously that's going to be way more than I had contemplated in terms of the scope.
Okay, well, it sounds like we need a little bit more information.
Yeah, it does,
and that report. So the CEO has indicated that that will be coming shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others to that portion, the drainage piece? Okay, others to any other portions that are here?
Just a,
Councillor Papp?
maybe I missed it. So what are we doing with Carriage Hill?
Mr. Mannel?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just,
That's
what
okay.
are we gonna do?
There'll be a request for proposal for design.
For that particular
Engineering
sewer.
to design the
Okay.
storm sewer and that sort of thing. We have a master plan already for the storm sewer system in
Okay.
that area. There'll be, you have to go through the environmental assessment process.
Right.
There'll be a public information meeting. At that time, there'll be more or less the general plans as to what we plan to do in that area. And we'll identify that a storm sewer running up Hurricane Road to collect that low spot there that the residents are concerned about. So, these things can be dealt with as
So
part of that.
essentially from Pelham to Chestnut.
You only need to go really from Pelham to midway to Chestnut
Okay.
Street, so, but the work starts at Short Hill Place and comes up to Hurricane, and that'll be a reconstruction to an urban cross-section. There'll be a new water main replacement in there, sanitary sewer repairs, sidewalks both sides of the road, all those kind of things.
Not for this year, though.
Well, that's in the budget, so that's
In the budget, we hope to accomplish all of that?
well, I don't know if we'll accomplish all that, well, that'd be the goal.
I'm not trying to put you on the back, I just want to say, we're not ignoring, I shouldn't say, we are going to deal with it so the residents know that we've taken it under consideration and are going to move forward. Okay, that's fine.
We'll go to a request for proposal process and get the design underway.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others, to any other items in that particular budget? Pleased to see that Highlands in there as well. I know they've been waiting, so
Yeah.
look forward to that. Anything else? Okay, Ms. Pupel?
Okay, on to vehicles. Since the last meeting that we had for the discussion of the capital budget, we did go back to the manager of Public Works and talked about the sidewalk snowplow and the turf mowing. It was leased last year for about approximately $10,000, so we're going to continue on with that lease. So that significantly reduced the amount in that area, and it helps our debt repayment, our debt debenture schedule. So the total requests for 2015 are $184,000. And they will be provided from vehicle reserves and development charges. The vehicles reserve climbs back to really healthy at 2019 of just over $320,000. So I'll pause here for any questions.
Thank you. Councilor Ribbiak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm sorry that I'm butting in as often as I am. Can I hear a bit, or can we hear a bit, please, about the 100 horsepower tractor with arm mower, rear mower, snowplow? Is this in addition to our equipment, or is this replacing something? And how was the work done before, if it was done before the contemplation of the purchase of this vehicle?
Mr. Mann?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that tractor is, it's a similar unit to what you see plowing the downtown area of Fenwick, downtown area of Font Hill. They're a large four-wheel drive tractor. It'll have a plow on it to be used for the cul-de-sac type streets. It's identified in the development charges. Actually, there's two identified there for future years. So the need is there to start to, I guess, do a better job in the cul-de-sac type areas. The arm mower is simply a boom that comes off the back, get into the tight spots that we want to get into, and this being a larger type tractor, it'll be able to get into those spots and deal with some stormwater detention ponds that are close to roads, not too far off road, that sort of thing, to start maintaining these things in a better state.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It sounds like then this is going to be a pretty substantial improvement to the way to our processes in the past.
We're hoping.
We weren't doing this in the past, I take it. You didn't say that this work is being done using contracted equipment or labor or anything, so I'm assuming this is new stuff that we're doing.
It enhances the job. The cul-de-sacs have been done by the 5-ton trucks, dump trucks with plows. They're not suitable for those type of locations.
That's right.
They're tough to get into. There's complaints with respect to what we do there, so I think this will be an enhancement to that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good answers. I like it.
Thank you. Others? Ms. Pupel, so leases, and I meant to ask it as well in the previous budget, but so leases are capital, is that correct?
This would not be considered a capital lease, but we're requesting that the reserve funding pay for the lease so that it doesn't taint the operating expenditures.
Okay, and I noticed as well in the previous one about the Christmas lights and the leasing. There's some, the Christmas lights, I'm trying to look for the page here, but there's some leasing costs in that as well. Renting a boom truck, 520. Installation, rent the boom truck, etc.
Those are considered costs, that, we take all the Christmas decorations as a pool, so they are a capital item and they're inventoried, so any cost related to that would be part of that capital. So it's a little bit different when we're talking about the Christmas decorations and lighting, because we maintain that on a regular basis. This lease here is not similar because it will be sent back once we're finished with the lease.
Okay, okay, thank you. Anything else? There being none, can you move to the next budget, please?
The cemetery's budget is a good one. It's at 0. We talked about bringing forward the cemetery's master plan and using that as a format to move the cemetery's budget forward in the future. Something that could have come out of the budgets this year was the road and enhancement projects out there. The dirt roads are fine and can do the job they need to do in the interim. And we will, look at bringing something forward in a future year. But the cemetery's reserve obviously is in a deficit and needs to rebuild itself, and we need to find a way of making that happen with a solid business case coming forward to council before we proceed. So that's why it was removed.
Okay, I think council's had discussions about that, looking for that business case, so thank you for that. Any questions? Please proceed to the next. Thank you.
The wastewater budget, again, this is highly tied to any roads improvement projects. As you can see, the Highland Avenue reconstruction, there's the sanitary laterals that need to be done while that project's happening. We have the regular annual replacement, or the replacement programs and inspection programs. The biggest thing being the Deer Park easement sanitary sewer replacement of $820,000. So total of 1.1 million, just over 1.1 million. Again, it's coming from the 300 from the wastewater reserves, 820 of that is coming from development charges, and that's for the Deer Park easement and replacement. And the reserve remains very healthy in the wastewater area, 563, 541. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Papp?
Just very quickly, through Mr. Mayor and Madam Treasurer, Mr. Mayor, just again, explain to me quickly, the reason we're doing the Deer Park sanitary sewer replacement is because it's under capacity, or it was never built for handling that subdivision? Just remind me again.
That, the Deer Park easement, that it starts at Deer Park Crescent, it runs
Right.
between the houses and
Right.
Oak Mountain Road to Hay Street.
Right.
It's identified to deal with flows from what's known as Area 1, which is northwest Font Hill, behind the fire hall. It takes those flows. The sewer was never designed, as you said, for
From the fire hall
that
coming
area.
down.
So it's identified as you get closer to build out in that neighborhood. We know there's certain issues with the sewer at that location.
Yes.
Felt it's better to deal with it up front and get it out of the way.
Okay.
It's all development charge money.
Okay. Good.
Thank you. Thank you. So it isn't for Deer Park, it just happens to be there. It's the last piece. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Rubbiak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this is really for clarification, because I'm not sure that any of this appears anywhere in the budget, but I think Mr. Mann will be able to clarify. I understand that there's going to be a new force main along Foss Road constructed in this coming year, and that's a regional project, is it not? And are there any costs going to impact on us with regard to the work that's going to occur with regard to that?
Mr. Mann?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. That is a regional project. They've been working on it for the last couple of years, and I believe they do plan to do it in 2015. There are no costs to the town. They'll construct it. Right now, that force main runs down adjacent to the north edge of road on Foss Road right into the city of Welland. My understanding is it'll be on the south side of the road for this new one. So again, it'll be in the ditch line somewhere and or in that South Boulevard area. No cost to the town.
So any construction we see along that route will not be our budget, our work, nothing. Good. I just wanted to clarify.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have water. The water budget is at $268,805. Again, Highland Avenue is part, and Pelham Street reconstruction, Short Hill Place to Hurricane Road is part of the road replacement. Also included in here is the mobile water meter reading data collector, which will further expedite our water meter reading system, and also the water loading station software that will allow the bulk water haulers to use technology to load their cars without having to come in here. They're automatically updated at the station when they get down there. So it's going to eliminate the times that they need to come into this building to have their cards loaded. And it's going to take away the card, which is causing a lot of problems out at the station currently. The water reserves will pay for the projects for 2015, and the water reserve remains very, very healthy at just under $2.7 million at the end of 2019. Any questions?
Councillor Papp?
Just through you, what's this mobile water meter? So you just, scan the house? Is that how it works?
Yes, it's a centralized unit, and it's able to scan more houses all at one time. Currently, we have to drive through every neighborhood.
Right.
And the systems that we have, there's little quirks to them. So some houses might have their meter blocked a little bit, and it doesn't read it, so they have to pull right into the driveway. So they've got all those anomalies figured out, but this is supposed to resolve all of those issues and allow them just to kind of drive through the streets in a much faster way.
More accurate, I presume, too. Okay,
More
thank
accurate,
you.
yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Others?
Parks and Recreation, there's just over $400,000 being requested for 2015. Again, we went through these budgets with fine-tooth comb to make sure that we were doing only those things that were critical. Included in here, some projects include the Cenotaph and the Active Transportation Master Plan and the Kunda Park subdivision park development. It's 100% covered under the development charges, so it was put forward. In here, we've received funding from a grant for the Cenotaph of 16.8, development charges under $271,000, and the rest will come from the reserves. And the reserve remains very healthy again at 2019. And I'll pause for any questions.
Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, I think in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, the tennis club did make a contribution to repairs to the tennis courts in the past. Is there something built in? I know it's a small number, but is there some kind of agreement with the tennis club? Is the Centennial Park tennis court resurfacing?
I'm going to call on Ms. Van Ravensway.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We have been in discussions with the Tennis Association. This amount is long overdue. We normally upgrade every 5 years. And we will be speaking to them.
It was
See what we can come up with.
2007 or 8, I think, last time it was done.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in the past, there has been an agreement where they have reimbursed some of the costs there, right?
Normally, they pay a third.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask the same question, so thank you. Others? Councillor Papp?
Quickly through you, Ms. Van, the parking lot on the skate park lots, didn't we do most of this already? Or is this finishing off that particular area totally?
Who wants that? Mr. Mantle?
I'm just curious, I
had a similar question, Mr. Mantle.
Well, this is the parking lot adjacent to the skate park.
Right.
And right now, I think it has one light, which was there before, an existing pole. So there's the ball diamond lights.
Right, I remember those, yeah.
So those ball diamond lights will come down. Lights that are closer to the surface will be used to light up the skate park, and then the parking lot will be also illuminated.
Okay.
Just to build on that, I think I've received, I don't know if other councillors have received some complaints from residents in the area when the lights are on in this for the skate park, because those ball diamond lights are so high for seeing the ball at night. Well, there isn't that necessity anymore. And also the Astrological Society or whatever it is might be concerned about it. It's just the glow that covers that. So this, I understand, will be much lower. Is that correct, Mr. Mantle?
That is correct. They'll be more in keeping, just to floodlight the area. The parking lot will be your standard lights, which will be 7 meters tall, 8 meters tall, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Councillor.
I don't know who can answer. Just remind me of the Kunda Park subdivision park. What exactly kind of park are we looking at? What are we looking at doing there? I'm trying to remember. I remember there were some discussions.
The CAO has indicated he wanted to answer that. Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kunda Park, as you're aware, is a longstanding issue with regards to the development of the subdivision.
Right.
We do have, at this point, the planning approvals to proceed with the park in that, for that proposed subdivision. It's the town's desire to proceed with the design build on that particular playground this year, or park, if you will. In the subdivision, yeah. Town-owned, on the town-owned land. The theme of the park will be a fairly significant departure from typical playground builds that we've seen in the community. This will be a playground or play area that is referred to as a naturalized play area. So as I know we're all proud of our playgrounds, but manufactured play equipment with the plastic slide and the McDonald-looking colors and things like that are fine, but children generally repurpose the equipment to play other things, and it's kind of like putting a hamster in a wheel and letting them spin around until they get tired. The concept is to move away from that and go into more of a naturalized setting where children are encouraged to use different skill sets, such as playing with getting dirty and playing with mud and sticks and things. Naturalized playgrounds put emphasis on exploration and free play. And sort of having the play equipment, there's more play structures, but they're also constructed from elements from nature. So we use a lot of wood materials, rock. Usually there's some water component to it. And I'd be happy to provide council with more illustrations of what that looks like, but it's it's a well-documented playground that there's been lots of study done on it, and there's some really impressive results as far as child development goes, risk-taking, those sorts of things. And there is a subdivision in Welland, I understand, that is proceeded with a naturalized play area. That was in the news last year, I believe, for development. I don't believe they've built anything yet, but that was their concept as well, to move to that type of a play feature.
I'd like to see conceptual drawings of that as something more, I'm going to say a rendering of how that would. I am somewhat familiar because there has been some documentaries in parts of Vancouver. They've gone to those types of playgrounds. Aside from they've changed it to make it more to bond, if you want to call it, with the natural aspects of the actual development. So I'm very pleased to see that. That's why I was asking what's going to go up there. Is it going to be? And I mean, it works. The other stuff has worked, but if this is something that can take into consideration the natural components of what's in Kunda Park, that would be really neat to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others to that piece? Just to that, I think the last playground that we developed from scratch was Cherry Ridge, and it was a neighborhood playground as well.
Yeah.
That process that we used was a process that involved the neighbors as well, and I hoped that we'd follow a similar process. So I don't know who wants to answer that, Mr. CEO?
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Mayor. There will be certainly an extensive community consultation. It's a park that will serve the larger neighborhood, not just Kunda Park subdivision. So a design charrette with the parameters of we're working on a nature park. What features would you like to see in there? And really a visioning exercise for kids to be participants in designing their own park, I think is pretty exciting.
Thank you. Be good actually to get some children in the neighborhood there. I think there were a few, if I recall, but it was mostly adults. So it'd be good to get some kids at the design charrette for the park.
I think we want the stakeholders, which are the children, at
Yes,
the table.
absolutely. Okay, thank you. Any others to that? Other items in the Parks and Recreation budget? Counselor?
For you, Mr. Mayor, I think you've been notified that that next Monday we're going to be hearing a presentation from the Heritage Advisory Committee, and there might be some discussion on that Central Taft. So if we affirm that, that's still open for their presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Just to let all of council know, there's been some concerns, and maybe Ms. Van Ravensway can speak to it a little bit, and we can be in contact with them, but there's been concerns from some members of, they're somehow involved with the Heritage Committee about the plan for the cenotaph, which is a sort of a shaving, maybe Ms. Van Ravensway can fill us in with with what this plan is and what they're recommending, and then just fill us in a little bit on that.
For you, Mr. Mayor. The original plan for the cenotaph has, at the present time, lead lettering, which have fallen out. When we met with the Historical Society, the Patrick and O'Brien, the Royal Canadian Legion, we all met on site. We looked at it. Actually, there was the Military Museum was there as well. And Patrick and O'Brien went back and did the investigation, and they came back with two different options to restore. The one was to, because what we asked for was the lead lettering to be restored. So we received a quote on that, which was a higher quote, as well as there was no guarantee that the lead lettering would remain. They couldn't guarantee that they would, that the lead letters would stay put. The second option was to take the, well, either way they'd be taking the monument away. They would be slicing off the sides just a quarter of an inch, or, you know, very, whatever they had to remove the indents.
Yep.
And then they would be sandblasting. And they would be restoring all of the, you know, the upper parts, the lower parts, back to a nice condition. And that would be good for life. We looked at both of the options, and it was agreed that the Legion also agreed that they would rather have it restored so that it would not have to be fixed again in whatever many years.
I like that.
Councillor?
Now, of course, feedback I'm getting from the Heritage Committee is, number one, this monument was indeed erected in 1920, so it's been good for 90 years, whatever. And unfortunately, the number of letters that are in need of repair out of that whole monument are indeed only 20 letters. That's all, many, let's say 20 characters. So their feeling is, and they have found a business, I believe it's in Ottawa, that will come down and do it in place to repair those letters. And I don't know what their cost is, that's what is going to be in the presentation. But this company can come down and repair it in place and not have to move the monument any place. And plus, I believe Kirkpatrick was concerned that the letters would be of a different color. This guy ages the letters before he puts them on. And myself, if after 80, 90 years, or 90 years, if only 20 letters have fallen off, perhaps this guy in Ottawa with advanced technology, I'm sure that if we go another 90 years and only have another 20 letters fall off, and this, of course, when you do the letters, that is restored to original condition. And I think we should hear what the advisory committee comes with. It could actually be lower than the 33. I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay. Thank you. What I recommended to them was that I would raise it here. I'm glad you raised it. I encouraged them to, because this budget is at committee and will go to council for ratification later on in the evening,
Okay.
that I'd encourage them to ask to see if they wanted to make a presentation, and encourage them to do so before Wednesday at noon to make that in to meet our guidelines. So, but I'm glad you raised it. It is something that we'll have to think about. I did raise it with the director earlier today and let her know that there were some concerns in the community about it.
Okay.
So I think what I'd recommend is that we would, we can approve this now pending, hearing their presentation on Monday and considering what all the options are.
Sure.
Okay. Councillor Kersey, to that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I see that tied to that project is a grant that I believe has been approved at this point. How would that impact on the grant if we now change our plan and revisit the whole subject.
Thank you. Ms. Van Ravensway?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We would be notifying Veterans Affairs and asking whether they would agree with the new concept. I've also been in touch with the Royal Canadian Legion, and they have approved the $5,000 donation towards the monument restoration. And I've heard today that they want to go forward with the plan. They do not want to change it back to the lead lettering. So we would have to
Okay.
offset that.
Okay. Thank you. Any further, Councillor?
Nope, just wanted to make a point there.
All right, and maybe we can be in contact with Veterans Affairs to see if, well, I guess the director indicated that their funding's to that specific plan. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since there may be conflicting ideas in place here, I just wonder, the Heritage Committee is coming forward with a presentation, I understand,
I
on
think
Monday?
it's some representatives of an advisory committee to the
Okay,
Heritage
but they're
Committee,
going
but
to be
whoever it
addressing
is.
this issue, and in
Yeah.
fact, if the Legion has another opinion, I wonder if we could get, not necessarily a presentation from them, but a submission from them saying what they have, and again, this could all be pending. The Veterans Affairs could say, do it the way we approved, or else you're not going to get any money. So, I think we have three scenarios in here, and I think we have to weigh them all. But again, to put this in, and perhaps red circle that number to say, okay, that's as high as we're going on it, and we'll look at the other ways, and we can make our decision after we get all three information pieces.
Point. Good point. So Ms. Van Ravensway, can you be able to do that? Okay, thank you. So we'll see if we can get something from the Legion. Thank you. Others to this? Councilor Ribbiak?
Just a quick question. So is this 33,000 our net cost, or is that inclusive of the grants that are contemplated?
On page 9.5,
Yeah, I'm looking at
you'll
it, and
see
I
that it's
can't-
not. So what's the net cost, Madam Treasurer?
3,000 is the cost to do the whole construction project, so 16.8 is grant, and the rest would come from the reserve.
Okay. And so our cost is the net?
16.2.
Is of 16. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That
Yes?
does not include the Legion's
5,000.
5,000.
So it could
So
come
that
down to
would
11.
Come down.
Grant is 16.8 from the federal government, plus 5 from the Legion. So it's really 11.2 from the town.
That's right.
5,000 is realized.
That's great. Thank you for asking. Maybe this can be changed to reflect that, if it's been
Yes,
confirmed already.
I just heard of it today, and it's confirmed up until the point of the confusion, so don't want to include it until I know for sure that we're receiving it.
All right, thank you very much. Any others to that? Any others to any other items on that piece? I just have a question about the rail trail. I'm very pleased that we're proceeding on that and actually going to complete the western portion, I would say, of the rail trail all the way to Murdoch. I do note that when I've walked that particular trail, that a lot of people come in from Church Street and use the abandoned rail line from Church all the way to, however you'd say that, sort of mid-block to Foss, where it joins in to the park. I don't know if there's any plans for future. I don't see any here in terms of that. It might require, well, a property acquisition or something. Why isn't that section, I don't know who's going to answer this, but Ms. Van Ravensway, why aren't we doing that section of the rail trail?
That section, through you, Mr. Mayor, that section is, it abuts a live rail line right there. If anything, we should be avoiding use at
Avoiding
that
the rail
point. And directing everyone through the park.
Safety thing.
Safety.
Is that because we don't own the property there? I was sort of thinking outside of the box using the creative problem-solving process. Would it be possible to purchase some, I was actually speaking to Mr. Mantle as well, would it be possible to purchase some land adjacent to that and then enter that way safely? You don't know. Is it something that we can look into for future years? It would just really complete the loop, because a lot of people do that loop anyways. And so if it's, we're not encouraging it because we haven't fixed up the trail, and yet we know that many of our residents are using it, perhaps we should consider a safe way of allowing them to do that, and it might require some property acquisition. So if colleagues are okay with that, maybe it's something, not for this year, but for future years,
Find out.
to look into,
Find out.
to complete that trail. Okay. Just watch for the trains, please. Anything further on the Parks and Recreation? Thank you. Ms. Pupel.
Saving the best to last, I guess, planning and development, 71,000 requested for 2015. Just completions and startups of other studies that are going on this year, including the Heritage Inventory Report, East Fenwick's secondary plan, continuing on with that. As you're aware, there was 100,000 put in 2014 that was not spent yet, so that carries forward automatically for the study. The comprehensive zoning bylaw mapping portion, comprehensive zoning bylaw was tendered last year. There was 60,000 put into that last year, so this is to complete it. And all of the funding will be provided from the Planning and Development Reserve and 9,000 from development charges. And the reserve is growing with a balance of 64,000 at the end of 2019. Any questions?
Councilors? Councilor Papp?
Just quickly through you to Mr. Glover. So when you, basically, Terrence, the comprehensive zoning bylaw and the mapping, that'll complete the process? We'll have a complete document? Is that basically in a nutshell? Or not yet? Yeah.
That's expected to complete the process. However, as we found with the official plan, there may be residual things after the
Okay.
fact, which would be a very minor amount, though.
But conceptually, and I guess from a policy standpoint, we would have that particular document for our purposes of planning.
Hope to complete that, yes.
Good. Okay, that's good. That's fine.
Thank you. Councilor Durley?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just the Heritage Inventory Report, can we just elaborate on that a bit? What's involved in all of that to the tune of the same amount as an East Fenwick secondary plan?
The treasurer may be able to elaborate as to the capital budget here. But what I see we use that for, there's a, before we can designate a property, we have to have a history, a background to that property to be able to support the designation, as well as to perhaps go to the public to say, this is why we want to designate, this is the importance of your property here. And that study will help us to develop that work, to therefore then designate the properties.
Okay, and that's capital, that we're paying someone to do this? Is this what we're doing?
Mr. Glover?
That's the proposal as I see it in the capital budget here.
Okay, and that will be contracted out?
We don't have any expertise in-house to do that type of work.
Okay. Thank you.
It wouldn't be, yeah, it would be a consultant as opposed to the committee members. Or I think perhaps the councilor's asking as well, Mr. Glover, because there was a request from the Heritage Committee for some funding in their open house submission and the operating. So can you just clarify that? That's quite different than...
And under the operating budget, and again, the treasurer might be able to elaborate further, there was a number of items and initiatives that the Heritage Committee wanted to accomplish. I'm sure that we'll speak to that at the operating budget level. This is, from what I see, a study that would be done through a consultant that the committee has not completed or perhaps is not able to complete themselves. So it will really give the town a step up in terms of where we want to be from a heritage designation. In terms of the operating budget, there was things such as publications, printing, courses they wanted to attend, books they wanted to have for their libraries, things of that nature. So it's a separate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rubyak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for my clarification, is the 10,000 to support a project that has already been defined, or is this money being set aside in the event that specific properties are identified and might therefore require a study?
Mr. Glover?
We have approximately 80 properties already identified on our list. We need to expand the background to those properties before we can designate any property. So this money would be used towards expanding that background to complete the study for the heritage thereby allowing us to designate the properties.
All 80 properties?
We hope to. Again,
$1,000. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Others? Councillor Junkin?
So just to clarify, so this 10,000 is above the 5,000 that they asked for back in December?
Operating
Or is this lumped in with that 5,000?
operating budget, yeah, this is the capital budget, and this is what we're looking at
I'm
here.
sorry, yeah, you're right. Okay, I'm sorry, yes, okay.
I think it's separate. Can you elaborate, Madam Treasurer?
Yeah, this is a separate piece. However, it ties into some of the requests under the operating side, so all of that needs to be looked at, which we will be discussing at a meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity on this, I thought the Heritage Advisory Committee's role was to inventory the properties, collect up all the significant details about the properties, and make recommendations to council as to what properties should be designated and for what reasons. Now, we're going out and hiring a consultant to do this same work. And if that's the case, is there a point in having a Heritage Advisory Committee? I mean, if they've identified 80 properties, now we just start moving through them with the consultant to do the work and not need the advisory committee. It just seems like a sort of an overlap and a duplication to me. Maybe I
Glover?
don't understand it.
Okay, Mr. Glover?
In my opinion, the most pressing matter is to develop a history on each of these properties so we can move to designation. There are other functions that the committee has chosen to pursue. I think the most expedient and productive way for the municipality would be move forward with this inventory and this background to these properties, and then perhaps have the committee review that study to in terms of designating properties.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's something, if I might, Councillor, and I see you, Councillor Junkin, but it is something that the committee has been trying to do and just hasn't been able to get to. I think it goes back to probably I'm thinking the public meeting, Councillor Durley, was a year and a half ago, is that correct?
Lucy was still here, that was
Yeah.
quite a while ago.
So a year and a half ago, and all the preparation work on that, and really it hasn't progressed. So, Mr. Glover, is that why you're recommending this, that would really help accelerate the process? Is that what your thinking is, or is there another reason as well?
No, that's exactly right. We haven't seen much movement from the committee on this topic. It's beginning to be concerning because we would like to move forward. And I think this is the most expedient way to accomplish that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Glover. Councillor Junkin.
I just need to answer Councillor's concerns. From what I understand, and after reading the Heritage Act and what is required to designate a building, what our advisory committee does, they identify and I guess we have 80 sites, but then to actually research and fill out the forms so that can go ahead, that's a very detailed process that I really don't think we should be asking an advisory group to put that much time and effort into it, and that's where that's what their feeling is.
Thank you. I think that's what Mr. Glover is saying as well. Mr. Glover?
That's correct. The Heritage Committee has, we haven't explicitly talked about it in that nature, but they've insinuated or expressed that again, as Councillor Junkin has suggested, that's not their role. Some staff do this as a profession outside the Heritage Committee. It may be something that a consultant may more successfully accomplish.
Okay, that's good. So it could be a way to accelerate it and also have the Heritage Committee fulfill the role that is more appropriate for them to fulfill. Okay, thank you. Anything else? No. Any other items?
Mr. Mayor?
We talked about all the others. Do you want to talk about the last one, Councillor?
Just I'm curious to know, Mr. Mayor, where we will get to in the East Fenwick secondary plan based on this budget.
Well, Mr. Glover's standing up and the CEO is signaling he wants to answer that.
Well, they can fight.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The plan is to complete the secondary plan within this budget. There was money allocated last year as well. So this is additional dollars. We still are waiting for the consortium that has undertaken the studies to come and present a bill for that, and then we need to do a review on what we would consider the work that the municipality would normally do and what would we not do, and then come to an agreement on the price or purchase of those studies, and then move forward with the planning. So it's our intent to complete that secondary plan this year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this 10,000 plus what was budgeted previously, you expect to be sufficient to get us there?
That's correct.
And we expect to get there this year?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we know how much was budgeted before? Or is that just
Clarify.
staying in the reserve or?
It's $100,000 and it's been maintained in the reserve currently. But with the studies, because of the nature of the study and that they, can be less in 1 year and more than the next, we haven't spent any of that money yet, so I didn't want to tie up the reserve dollars in this year until we know that that is going to go over that amount. But you'll notice in 2016, we have another $50,000 that would help offset, because a lot of times, as the studies are completed, we don't get the bill until the next fiscal year anyway, so.
Okay, thank you.
Just for council's information, the library reserve, our library is asking for $34,125. Again, they have like their PSAB requirements, the computer services development of $14,000. They want to do a circulation counter replacement and painting, relocation of servers, and a replacement of furniture. So originally when this budget was brought in, they had a couple facilities items in there that were moved over to the facilities operating budget because they were operating in nature. So this is the balance of those items that they would be taking care of themselves. And the funding will come from their library reserve and their donations. And the reserve is in a positive $2,995. That's their capital portion of that reserve that they have. They also have an operating portion that would be seen on the operating side. So, and that's it. I don't know if there's any questions on
See
the
if
library.
there's something on the library. Questions, comments from council colleagues regarding the library?
Quickly,
Counselor?
just quickly, through Madam Treasurer, they have a donation account with 10,000, or is that anticipated raising those funds?
You, Mr. Mayor, they have a charitable account, and it is,
Okay.
it's already in there.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I need to know.
All right, thank you.
Okay. In section 12 of the budget binder, council will note the reserves. Balances, that something that I've been, preaching about is getting the reserves with some meat into them. So in 2015, January 1, we're starting with 189,540 net because we were borrowing from some other reserves to do some of our infrastructure projects. By the end of 2015, that grows to 361. So we're on the path of starting to build the reserves. If you'll notice the non-discretionary reserves, which are the ones that council is only allowed to use for specific purposes, those reserves remain very, very healthy at over $4 million. And again, right now, this is just a projection. We have not completed the year-end audited statements for 2014, so those balances can change as a result of that. So the 5-year projection indicates a balance of 916,000. Do I have the right number here? In 2019, this is for the development charges. I apologize, that's on the next sheet, page in section, or the back sheet in section 12, sorry. So it's impacted again by the requirement for the development of East Fonthill, and as council is aware, we are debenturing some of the larger major infrastructure components of the development charges. The smaller amounts are being taken right out of that reserve. There are revenue projections in there. We are anticipating significant growth will start soon, 2016 and 17, and again the debenture function. Major infrastructure debenture. Again, in section 13, just for council's information, I apologize, this has the wrong number under Maple Acre Library replacement. It'd be nice if it came in at that under design build, but it is 1.365 million, and the community center is put in there for council's information as well at 27 million. Again, these require further council approval before they can proceed. Just to recap on the 2015 capital budget requests, from our starting point till our end point, we really did a lot of work with respect to making sure that there was a continuation of building the reserves, ensuring that our debt instruments are within legislated levels, and that's the debt repayment limits, allowing for the adequate cash flow needed to do the projects throughout the year. We focused on major critical infrastructure only, and the focus on projects that drive economic development. So that's where we are. Following this process, I'm requesting that the council approve the 2015 portion of the capital budget and receive for information the balance of the 5-year projection. And I also ask council to receive for information the major infrastructure requests. And on behalf of senior staff, I thank you for your consideration. I just want to note, Kate is in the room, my deputy treasurer, and she has done volumes and volumes of work on this budget and all the changes and stuff. So I just want to say a big thank you to Kate and kudos, and also the directors who gave me a budget and then I wiped it clean.
Thank you,
Not really
Ms.
that
Pupel. They're not laughing. Questions regarding this last section before we get to your motion, Councillor Papp? The last section of reserves, and I do have a question. Well, first question is it that yellow-green because of Ms. Gilbert? Is that why it's that color? Do we ever budget, I'm just noting page 12 here, the first tab in tab 12, and under development charges, there's no additions for revenue. Do we ever budget for that?
I apologize. If you look at the schedule at the third page in, it's page 12.3. We do a reserve revenue and expenditure out of there, so, yes.
Okay, so
We are required to provide this under the legislation of the development charges, so the reserve.
can you give
technically,
me a, what are you expecting in and?
I will give you some numbers. The revenue for
see, okay.
2014 is projected at 490,000, and that increase is twofold in 2015. I think the projection is going up about 40% in 2015. But we adjust accordingly as the year progresses. I'm not sure what the development charges fell out at 2014 yet, but, and then you'll have the expenditures. Out of these expenditures here is showing you what the debt, from your debt schedule that you saw, the debt repayment schedule, all of those principal and interest payments have been allocated in here, but they may not happen. It depends on what council approves going forward. So really the only year that's a focus year is the 2015 year.
So this chart, 2015, you're expecting a, sorry if I'm reading it right, a revenue of 982,000?
That's with some of the major construction projects underway. We're anticipating that just
Okay.
based on the history.
Okay, so to go back to the first page, the 797 opening balance. Is that different than here because it's 813?
No, that's the end of the year. If you go up to the very top, balance December 31st, 2013.
475?
No, the very top, right-hand column under total, 797,110.
Yeah, but that's from 13.
That's the ending of the year, so it's
Is that correct? That's from 13 or 14?
It's 14. Sorry.
13.
It's opening 14.
It's opening 14, bring it.
Okay, so this isn't labeled correctly, or one of the sheets isn't, it doesn't
No,
match?
that's.
Maybe we can meet later, but it just doesn't appear that it matches somehow.
This development charge is on page 12. It's not updated for the revenue and expenses. So the ending balance is not correct on that page,
Okay,
okay?
got it. So we do budget for.
We do budget for it, yes.
Okay. Can that be fixed?
Go fix for the next meeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry for my confusion. Others on that, Councillor Percy?
Thank you. Just through you, Mr. Mayor, for clarity, Madam Treasurer, could you walk us through the funding of Maple Acre? And, you've got 879,075 out of DCs. The fundraising is self-explanatory, and the debenture of 385,925. When I look at the DC schedule, I can't identify the 879 expenditure out of the DCs, or is that a debt instrument that's funded by the DC?
Note the percentages, I don't know if I have the percentages for, do you have the debt? There is, out of the 1.3 million, it's on our schedule, how much is DCable. The architect is also, the architect fee of 75,000 was also included in there as a portion for DC.
Right.
It's 42.
So 42% of the 1.365 is DCable. So that's 573,300, 31,000 from the
2,000.
architect design, but this says 879.
Yeah, there was a slight difference in it, depending on whether or not that was included in
Okay.
that. And then the rest is just going to be a debenture.
Okay, sorry, can you, I missed that. Counselor, did you
Yeah,
get
I missed that too.
Okay, can you
don't
fill
get
us in?
that, yeah.
What's
From-
the proposed funding? It's a percentage, the DC's a percentage? So if that number changes, if it's 1 million, not 1.3, what do those
So
numbers
is
look
there
like?
an error on the DC line between the debt line?
On which, the back here?
Yeah,
I used your calculations for the DC on here,
okay.
and then this is based on the DC line. So this is from your original presentation.
Okay. So I'd have to have the DC byline in front of me, but it's a percentage, and you have to take into consideration what row you're taking that percentage from. And I know that there was an error on the one that we had presented from before, so we have corrected that in here. So, but I can get you the exact number that's going to be debentured, and it should be the number that goes on that scenario sheet that you received for debt.
So the 573, that's a debt instrument
That's the debt instrument.
funded by DCs.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what
So
you're
there's
saying.
no major, you wouldn't see a big DC drawdown.
No, you'd be debenturing for sure.
Which section of the DC is paying
Library
for?
has its own section in
So,
DC.
so that's, would be the 47,709 that I see every year?
Yep. Right now, you're seeing 47.7, right?
709, yeah.
It was 17.
Yes. So it'll be included out of there.
We could have more information on that for council's information. It just doesn't, yeah, the 2 pages don't seem to match.
Okay. So
Go ahead.
the debenture that is shown here under funding is debenture that is paid for out of what?
Operating.
Out of operating.
That would be
And
out of
then-
the- out
okay,
of
so-
the facilities.
Okay, so the entire facility, other than the fundraising, is is being paid by debt?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Just for clarity, so on that page 13, when it says funding, development charges, really the debt instrument, it would be, you could put in brackets debentures. The fundraising is fundraising, and then the debenture is really an operating debenture. And then that, what would be included in the DC page would be the costs to service that debenture.
It would be the cost to service the debenture.
Got it.
Yeah, it's the principal and interest payments that would only be coming out of the DC portion.
So that, does that help, counselors? So get that clarified, I think we need to kind of clean up a couple of pages there a little bit. Anything further on that, counselor?
No, that's fine. That's
Okay.
fine. I don't want to belabor it. That's fine.
Yep, okay.
At this point in time, because it's so far out there, the development charges, they're shown on the schedules that we have, but we may not need to debenture. It depends on all of so many variables. So that's why we always show it separate on a development charges line and not as a debenture, because it just allows us an option to
Fine.
come back and say, we're just going to take the money from the fund.
Good.
Thank you. Any others on those, that last section? Counselor Papp.
And back to the Maple Acre, this fundraising contribution, I thought I heard some point they have actual money set aside.
At this current time, what I'm aware of is about 25,000, but they wanted to start a capital campaign
Okay.
as soon as this is going to go forward.
So adjustments would be made both from the side of the actual construction or the actual reconstruction of the particular facility and how it's financed, because those instruments would fluctuate. And then also on the ability to pay it back, right? Okay, the other question is just, I always get a little confused, and maybe I'm wrong, help me here. When I look at construction costs, I've been familiar with construction costs plus soft costs. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain amount that you pay to put up the actual facility, the equipment and all the rest. But then there's the architectural cost. And I'm thinking of the community center, particularly, it says 27 million, but we've also set money aside to have design done, right? Is that on top of that? Right, so there's plus. So because it's, I think sometimes people get lost and think, well, we've incorporated some of those soft costs in the actual project costs, but it's not. These are actual physical construction costs.
Yep.
Well, that's the architectural design is the one that we've kind of done separately and approved outside
Right.
of budget. The soft costs in this 27 million would include the equipment inside the building.
No, I understand
Which is
that.
what we consider soft costs, right? So the architect,
See, I was used to, any engineering, any legal, those are considered soft costs. I'm not disputing, I'm just saying that when you put up the building, you include, just use from other projects, you include the beds, the furniture, and all the rest. But
So-
anything over and above that, like the design, any legal engineering costs are on top of this as well.
that is correct, yeah.
Okay.
What would be included in here is the equipment.
Is the
Yeah.
reason it's not there because we've already approved the architectural design costs?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And then fundraising, again, depending on when the finalization of that particular project comes back, we can make a determination of what we can actually realistically raise, which helps, and that same applies to Maple Acres. Okay, I'm clear. Okay, good.
Great.
Thank you.
Councilor Ribbiak?
Thank you, and on that point, just for clarification, I guess private builders would also include as their soft costs, our costs, building permits, development charges, those sorts of things. I take it we don't have those costs in these projects, or is that number in here somewhere?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be included in the RFP, and they are required to pay the permit fee, much like we did at Fire Station Number 3, so that is all inclusive. So this is capturing from the leisure plan study what the cost of this arena was going to be. The $1 million that we have allocated towards the architectural design already had its funding elements and taken care of that way, so that's why it wasn't included as an additional cost. I just wanted to show what we know for sure as from the leisure plan, what the additional costs are until we have known costs through this committee.
Okay, thank you. And so it does not include development charges. We don't have to pay those, is that correct?
No, that would be all encompassing in the RFP.
So yes, we are paying it.
We are paying
we-
development
Yeah.
charges?
We would be paying them
That's what it sounds like.
Okay.
And our own building permit
and
fees.
building permits.
Right. Well, I knew that part. I just didn't know the development charges. Mr. CO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to build on the treasurer's comments, the Architectural Advisory Committee is planning to come to council on February 4th. There is an ask for additional square footage that has not been included in this cost that council will have to consider, which could potentially have an impact. Second of all is that once we get the program nailed down for the design, we are hoping that a costing consultant will be hired to fine tune the construction numbers, because to be honest with you, that's a pretty high number for what I think we're contemplating, and we won't have a good idea until the costing consultant does their work. That helps then inform the tender process so that you've got an idea of what the market should be bidding in that neighborhood, as opposed to not knowing anything and having to figure it out based on the proposals.
Okay, thank you. Councilor, anything further? Councilor Pat?
And then along that, Mr. CAO, then, is it traditionally our protocol to put in a percentage amount for contingency for construction?
You always do a
Yeah,
contingency.
which I presume, there's not a set amount. Do you set a percentage, or do you?
Usually the construction contingencies would be in the neighborhood of 10 to 15%.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. So that's already built into that. All right, so you're right. I look forward to, once the plan's finalized, get the cost estimator, then we'll find out what we're dealing with, right? Okay, good enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others to that tab? Okay, thank you. And so I think, I see Councilor Papp, you have your motion there, but we do have the motion that the treasurer is recommending, and whether I think in the past, we've dealt with those types of motions as amendments, so I'd encourage you to do that. I remember last year's budget process when we red circled this or did that.
So I'll
It was an
propose
amendment.
that as
So,
an amendment to that.
Okay?
That's fine.
Thank you. So it has been moved by Councilor Kersey, second by Councilor Papp, that the 2015 capital budget presentation be received, and the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council approve the 2015 portion of the capital budget and receive the balance of the 5-year projected capital budget for information, and that the major infrastructure request for 2016 also be received. Councilor Papp, you have an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to propose the following amendment to that particular resolution as follows. moved by myself, and I need a seconder following this, that the reconstruction of Maple Acres Library be undertaken as a build design project at an all-inclusive capital cost of no more than $1 million, that the call for proposals be issued in July of 2015, and that the proposed 2015 capital projection for the reconstruction of Maple Acres be red circled.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think you need a seconder for that because we're in committee.
Oh, we're in committee.
So discussion to that, do you want to add anything, or I'll turn to colleagues? Councillor Kersey, you indicated you wanted to speak when you saw the motion, so I'll let you, and then Councillor Ribbiak has signaled he'd like to speak.
Thank you,
as
Mr.
well.
Mayor. I just wanted to get some clarity around the timing here. Are you requesting that the timing of construction be advanced from the 2016 projection that was put forward to us in this budget, and that we've reviewed with the debt servicing in the scenario 3 that was put forward to us at our last Cal meeting? Or what entirely is envisioned?
The whole
in that?
intent of this is to get the project down to a reasonable cost, capital cost, that we continue with the construction schedule that we proposed in 2016. And that I want to get a better understanding, that I'm proposing a better understanding, or at least a much more full realization of the actual reconstruction of that facility. So I don't want to jeopardize the current debt flow projections. I honestly think that going this particular route will bring us a better project at a better cost and probably more just as functional. That's the intent.
Councillor?
So perhaps, would it not be clearer then to just ask that the projected $75,000 design costs that are in the 2015 budget be removed, and that staff proceed with an investigation of a design-build concept and bring back a report to us subsequent to our approval of the capital budget? Because if it's a design-build, there's not likely to be any costs incurred in the 2015 budget.
I think there would be. Maybe Mr. CAO, if you could.
Yeah,
Will there be progress billing, Mr. Mayor, as the project proceeded? So as you complete certain benchmarks, they're going to be issuing bills to us, invoices for payment. So the design phase will be paying in 15. The invoicing coming in for the bulk of the construction would happen in 16. So really, I think by putting the number into the budget, you're saying this is the cap, and to work with, go out and see what you can do, which gives us the ability to move ahead. As the treasurer mentioned before, if we don't have some number to put in the bid or the proposal, then the design build companies will be all over the neighborhood with quotes, and we won't be able to figure it out. And that was so I think that's an important component of it. What we're really trying to accomplish here is a sequencing of the project so that we're not going to negatively impact cash flow. I think that's the biggest concern at this point.
Councillor? Councillor Papp, you want to add to that?
And then just to pick up on so there would be some soft costs to go out and do this. So maybe there's some to be said to what Councillor Kersey is saying, that we keep some of the portion of that we call the architectural design, but maybe if you want to call it the soft cost to proceed with the build design RFP, or is that not the case? You could help me with that.
Mr. CEO?
Again, we need that cap dollar amount to go to the market.
And that's included in that?
That's all in, design
Okay,
build.
so you don't need the 75,000?
No. My understanding of the motion is the 1 million would replace the 75, and we would go to test the market on 1 million design build.
Okay.
So
May I speak to that?
Yeah, please.
Well, in that case, I certainly couldn't support that motion at this stage of the game. We clearly have projections on debt service and the quandary that we might find ourselves in. Before I would give consideration to that or supporting that, I'd like to see that played out in the debt servicing, because it may impact on the debt servicing. If we're essentially accelerating the project to design, build, and start construction in 2015.
Yeah, I don't know that that's the case, Madam Treasurer.
The RFP can be structured however we want it to work out. If we find economies of scale by doing design build, the RFP would simply say that the architectural design will take place in 2015 Those are the only costs we're going to bear. Construction will start in spring of 2016. You can specify that specifically. The architect design is going to take some time. If we're issuing the tender, say July, early August, it's, you got a 4-week tender process. By the time you get into the committee stage of design, you're looking at the design not even being completed until end of year 2015 regardless. So you still would have a 2016 construction start date. It's just finding economies of scale basically by using this one.
So further to that, if we support this motion as it comes forward, and if indeed the design build comes in at $1 million or less, it's a fait accompli. The project will move ahead.
I believe a report has to come back to council first for approval.
I think Councillor Papp in his last resolution red circled it, similar to other projects, so that it does have to come back to us.
Come back to us.
So it's not a fait accompli.
We typically, you may want to add in there, in the previous years, we've always added that it would not proceed until the report came back to council for approval.
I think that's what's intended by the red circling, but maybe for clarity of the motion, Councillor Papp, you'd consider
Be red circled and subject to
council approval.
council approval.
Okay. Councillor, I'm going to turn to Councillor Ribbiak next. Okay, Councillor Ribbiak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think most of what I want to say has been covered by Councillor Papp pretty adequately. All I want to suggest is that the two changes we're talking about, i.e. Getting rid of the $75,000 projected architectural cost and the reduction of the total capital cost, are both improvements to the plan that we're doing, and if anything will facilitate our plan going forward as opposed to getting in the way of it. So I would like to support that, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Junkin.
Yeah, before Mr. Papp made the resolution, I believe the number you put in was $1 million.
Yes, I have. That's what I've
And
stated. All
before, when
inclusive.
we were talking about it, we were talking about 1.3 or 1.4.
Right.
So
1.4,
So the million is just sort of a target, and if they go over it, we go by that. Is that it, or what? I'm sorry.
Yeah, who wants to answer that? Councillor Papp and then Mr. CAO.
Well, go ahead, Mr. CEO, but
Mr.
you can
CEO?
answer the
You're
protocol.
correct, Councillor. The target would be 1 million. We
They
would
come back
try
to
and
us.
get in as close as that. If it's not possible, we would have to, either way, we'd have to come back for council approval, but it gives us a benchmark from which to work from.
Excellent. Yep.
That's the whole idea.
Yep.
And it would have to include, as Councillor Durley pointed out, the demolition costs and those kind of things.
And, yeah, and disposal.
That sort of thing in the middle of the night.
Mr. CAO.
Okay, so the
So
only
that's not the
thing to
case.
my,
No, that's not the case.
Councillor Papp?
to my colleagues is I've added subject to council approval, which by red circling, that's what's happened in the past. Same thing with other things that we've done.
Okay.
Okay?
I just want to build on what some councillors have said. What does this do? This really does give that limit to it. So when we were looking at it before, and the concern that we had was really the schedule. So it meets the debt schedule and the funding for that, but it also gives a limit to it. It worked for Fire Station number 3, where we were very hard-nosed on that limit, which was very beneficial. And when we found out that, based on hearing from the industry, that we had to increase it a little bit to meet that, to get that tank in, then staff brought that case forward to council, and council considered that number. Also, there was a lot of work by members of the community on this, by members of Friends of Maple Acre, and their plan is, I would say, pretty straightforward in terms of keeping that existing 500 square foot historic structure, removing the part that is really a problem, and adding on to that. So, I see with this proposal from Councillor Papp that there's a lot of benefit, not only to moving the project forward, reducing the cost, keeping it to the schedule that we have, and also meeting the needs of the community. So I'm also very supportive of it. So thank you for raising it. If there aren't any other comments, I'm prepared to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? That amendment is carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now to the main motion as amended. Are there any other amendments that need to be made? If I recall recall in previous years, there were a whole bunch of red circling this and council approval that, so there aren't any required here. I would like to note that because Mr. Manel indicated it, that the section of that Carriage Hill development, he said it a number of times, would also include a little bit of a piece on Hurricane to make sure that that's done as well, and that's understood. I don't think we need an amendment for that, but there's just clear understanding on that. So without further ado, I will call the question on the motion as amended. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor
No, that's
Junkin,
fine.
so I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
That's fine. This is from the rookie counselor. Everyone realize this. Probably a silly question, but I know we have a marketing department. How come we never see budgets or how do they operate, I guess is what I'm asking.
Okay, thank you, Mr. CEO.
It's in operating and it's under the CAO's budget.
Oh, okay.
So you will see it.
Oh, okay, we will? Okay,
Oh, yeah,
thank you.
It'll become an
Excellent.
operating budget.
Okay, thanks.
So there are no capital items and that's why it's not here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there were capital items, Mr. CEO, would they go under information technology, or they would go under various departments?
If there was capital, like if you were to build a graphic arts design facility for Anna, that would probably go in the facilities budget. But
And I would argue that there's in the budget some replacement for signage, for instance, right? And that's sort of promoting and marketing
Okay.
the community, so.
Yep.
But that's under, I forget whose budget that's under.
Public Works.
Oh, it's under Public Works because it's in the road allowance, so.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before I call the question on the amended motion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried as amended. Very good work, thank you. And this was serious. And I think the last item is the adjournment of the meeting. It's been moved by Councilor Junkin. This regular meeting of Committee of the Whole be adjourned until the next regular committee scheduled for Monday, February 2nd, 2015, unless they're called by the mayor. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Thank you, Deputy Treasurer. Directors, thank you, Mr. CEO.
Good job, really. I mean,